Call the K-12 Subcommittee to order. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Carringer, Cassida, Clemens, Hurt, Love, Chairman Sapicki, Chairman Reagan, Chairman White, Chairman Haston.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Any personal orders before we begin? Seeing none, I'd like to update everybody on where we're at on the calendar. We're going to have a few things to make note of here. Item number 1, House Bill 858 has been taken off notice. Item number 3, catch me if I miss something here. Item number 3, House Bill 324 is rolled 1 week. 4, House Bill 727 is off notice. Item number 5, 1403 is rolled to rolled 1 week.
The vaccine calendar.
Oh yes, that's going to be on the 23rd, the vaccine calendar we announced last night on the House floor. Item number 8, 1335 is off notice. Item number 9, 1534 is rolled 1 week. And this one's also the vaccine, right? Number 12. Item number 12, House Bill 1215, is also going to be rolled a week to the vaccine calendar next week. And I believe that has us caught up. That brings us to item number 2 on the calendar, House Bill 962 by Chairman Powers. Motion. Properly motioned. Chairman Powers, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. House Bill 962 actually increases the half credit to 1 credit, the number of credits that may be awarded to a student for work completed in a release time course under a policy adopted by the local board. Currently, release time courses are limited to 1 class period per day. It is an elective credit, but students are encountering problems finding other half credit courses which would count toward their graduation. This bill will give the student 1 full elective credit toward their graduation. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion and be glad to take any questions.
Thank you for that explanation. Members, any questions for the sponsor on this bill? Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Powers. So this bill is going to create a 1 credit class, and that class meets every day?
Yes, yeah, it meets 1 hour per day, 5 days a week.
Okay,
yes.
So it's like a full-time class?
Right, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I will just say, I think this was, oh, I'm sorry. Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Powers. I think we had this bill last year.
Yeah, we've actually had it 2 years.
Okay.
This is the 3rd year. First year we created the opportunity for them to do this, and then last year we came back and we ended up giving a half a credit, but we just encountered some problems with that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? I guess I will say my one concern with it is that, I think we went to the 1 half credit last year, yes. And we really, to me, we just haven't really had a chance to have a good evaluation of what it's looked like during this past school year. Right. So that's the one apprehension I have about going ahead and doing this until we actually see what this looks like in action. But with that, if there's no other questions, all right, we will be voting.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to get that information and bring it to the full committee. But we've had the enrollments really picked up, and we've had a lot of good information and background that I can give you in full committee.
That would be good. Thank you. Okay. Representative Love, you're recognized.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess listen to that statement. Heard a phone call behind. I'm sorry. Okay. No, I was just, I didn't know what was going on. That's all. I got you. Now I gotta remember my question. So, were students able to use this in a virtual atmosphere or only in person?
Chairman Powers?
Both. They've been doing, it's kind of a hybrid that they've been doing. So, most of the courses and everything, and most of the classes up there are in person. We haven't, in some of the areas that they've been taking it. So they haven't had to do a whole lot of virtual, but just when they've been out for like a week or two, or maybe even one time for a month. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sponsor.
Chairman Sapiki?
So to follow up on that, the reason for the virtual was because of the COVID
Yes.
issues we've had, but your intention is next year when we go back in, that these children will be back in their normal school setting.
They're already back in, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our sponsor? Seeing none, we'll be voting on House Bill 962. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All those opposed say no. Ayes have it. On to full education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
So take us all the way to 6. All right, that brings us to item number 6, House Bill 840 by Representative Hakeem. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Properly motion. Representative Hakeem, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. House Bill 840 deals with the what's called the best practices for intervention of students who are struggling and dealing with the first signs of academic concerns or problems we may have. And it's called Response to Intervention here in the state of Tennessee. The framework for this intervention was started in 2014. And it was made mandatory engaged grades K through 12 in public schools. Evidence has shown that this has been beneficial to the students in improved academics, and the program now is at full implementation. And the review committee dealing with the BEP in both 2019 and 2020 recommended increased funding for the program for a teacher. Presently, the program has 2,750 students per teacher. What we're proposing would bring this down to 1,000 students per teacher. And this would help with students with disabilities, and the program, of course, needs reform, and I'm going to use the term real resources.
Any questions for the sponsor? Representative Cassidy, you're recognized.
How does this relate to what we did back in special session? And then number two, how's your conversations with the Department of Education gone?
Okay.
Representative Hakeem?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Okay. We probably have to ask persons like Representative Sapicki as to whether this would be doubling or covering the same ground. And I would be open to hearing from him if you want to.
Yeah.
Chairman Sapicki, your name has been called.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to answer your question, in the special session we've just got done, RTI, the framework that is RTI of how we do the interventions at the local level has been maintained. We did talk about the screeners that the locals do pay for right now, but the universal screeners that's being created. So a short answer to a long question here is, this bill does not affect anything we've done so far. If Representative Hakeem can cajole the $25 million to do this, it would allow more help for our most needy kids who are below or approaching expectations. That would help and coincide with what we've done with the learning loss bill to create lower class sizes, more intervention, more help for the kids who need it the most. So if we can get 25 million across the finish line, it would work. Thank you.
I will just add that it is one of the most common things that I've heard over the years about the problem when this was first came in was that, they were having to pull, a lot of LEAs were having to pull teachers and other resources to be able to make this happen. And so I appreciate the intent of this. Does anybody else have any? Representative Castor?
Just follow up, I mean, finance is not our problem, so we don't have to worry about 25 million, but my friend, you do. It ain't gonna happen. But what is the Department of Education think? Do they like this? I mean, if 25 million fell out of the sky, do they like this? Is this a good public policy? And I look at the two chairmen of this committee as well as you, Representative. Do we need to be doing this is this a good bang for our $25 million?
Representative Keem?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I apologize. I would have to defer. As far as the Department of Education, our colleague, has more insight on that than I do. Subcommittee.
Chairman Sapicki, you may defer to the Department of Education for next time around if they got on the calendar. But if you want to take this, you may go ahead.
It would help. RTI is good. I should probably sign on to this bill, but RTI is good. RTI serves a very important purpose. The department has given us the thumbs up on this. I don't think the department would oppose this if we can come up with the 25 million, because it's just going to help more kids. And I guess that's the short answer, again, to another long question.
Representative Keem, you have anything else to say?
I had been admonished and I accept. No, sir.
Without any objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 840. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed say no. Ayes have it. On to full ed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members.
All right, that brings us to item number 7, House Bill 1332 by Representative Harris. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second, we have your properly motion. Representative Harris, you are recognized on House Bill 1332.
Okay.
Hey, it's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead and go in the well. Need to make sure that we get those sent out beforehand before you get into committee. Representative Harris, you are recognized on House Bill 1332.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and to the committee for being so gracious in hearing this bill.
And I believe you have an untimely filed amendment.
Yes, I have one timely filed and one untimely filed amendment.
All right, which amendment are you looking at first?
The first one is going to be amendment number 004139.
All right.
And that makes the bill.
All right. This was the timely filed amendment. So would you care to explain your amendment?
Yes. So the amendment.
On the amendment?
Motion.
Sorry, we do not have a second motion to hear this amendment right now. Let's go on to your untimely filed amendment.
Okay. And on the untimely filed amendment is 005288.
All right. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
I'll give you a second on this one. Go ahead, because I think this is the one that is.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I think we have to have a motion to hear it with a 2/3 majority before we can.
the untimely filed.
Yeah.
Well, can I request to, Chairman, if I could, request to roll this one 1 week and see if I can get
All right.
the-
Without objection, we will roll this 1 week.
Great, thank you.
That brings us to Whitson wants to go to the Hill. So brings us to item number 10, which we're going to roll to the Hill. That brings us to item number 11, House Bill 1304 by Chairman Sapicki. Chairman Sapicki, you are recognized. Properly motion.
Am I okay?
Yes, you're recognized.
Mr.
Properly
Chairman, we'll
motioned.
be working off an amendment.
All right. Properly-
4893, sir?
4893?
Yes, sir.
All right. Would you care to explain your amendment, please?
This does make the bill, if the committee wants to add it on, I can explain the bill as amended.
All right, we'll be voting. All right, properly motioned. We'll be voting to add Amendment 4893 to House Bill 1304. All those indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. We are back on the bill as amended. Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, this is part 2 of the Discipline Act. If you remember on the House floor, we talked about getting some training for our teachers to be able to evaluate students that could be struggling from mental health or behavioral health issues or ACEs issues. What this bill does is it creates a 2-year grant program through the Department of Education to allow LEAs to opt into a program at their choice to help get our teachers and staff training that when these children come back in August, to make sure that they can help these children and identify them that may be struggling with mental health issues. And also this coincides with the Discipline Act to make sure that teachers get the training that they need to help identify students that need to be referred. This program is totally voluntary by the LEAs, and it is also totally voluntary by parents. Parents would need to opt into the program so that their children, if they need be, could be evaluated by the teachers or the staff. The premise behind this is to make sure that if we have a child that comes back to school that is struggling with mental health issues or just acclimating themselves back into the classroom, there's a vehicle here for the teacher to be able to be trained properly to identify that and make the necessary referrals to the proper staff to get those children the help they need. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you for that explanation. Members, any questions for the sponsor on the bill? Seeing none. Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Sapicki, for bringing this. I know that we've discussed a good amount of times about the mental health aspect of being separated from classmates, but also just dealing with so much information about COVID-19 for our students. Any idea of how much the grant awards will be?
Chairman Sapicki.
It's approximately $1.6 million for the next 2 years. Each year, $1.6 million. The department does know that COVID money would qualify for this help.
Representative Love.
Thank you. Also, are there any provisions to make sure that equity is in place when it comes to the grant divisions of the state when grants are applied for?
Chairman Sapicki.
Based off what we've been told by the fiscal note, if the LEAs choose to opt into this, as all 147 LEAs, there would be adequate money for all of them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll be voting on House Bill 1304. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. On to full education. That'll bring us to item number 13, House Bill 590. Do I have a motion? Motion. Properly motioned, and I believe you also have an amendment. All right, you're properly before us with a motion and a second on the amendment on 3928. Would you care to explain your amendment? All right, without objection, we'll be voting on Amendment 3928 and adding it to House Bill 590. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Back on the bill as amended. Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Okay, committee, you're going to have to hang with me on this one because I'm going to have to explain this one to you. When we went into special session, we were working very diligently because there's an issue that's going to rear its head in August. This school year, there's approximately, I believe, 30,000 children that did not come back to school this year in Tennessee. The way we do the BEP is we take attendance throughout the year, and at the end of the school year, we calculate what the attendance was for that school system, and that's the number we use to fund them the next year. Well, the problem we have is what happens if these 30,000 kids come back and they're not in the equation? How are LEAs going to be able to hire teachers, hire staff, make sure their classrooms are ready to go? So what this bill does, we've been working on this for 3 months now, and we think we have it in a place that meets the needs of our LEAs for the next year. So I'm going to walk you through this. If at any time you need me to stop, Mr. Chairman, just stop me and I'll expand if I have to, okay? So, I really wanted to have a dry erase board in here so I could just draw this for you, but I'm going to have to explain it to you. So, at the end of this school year in 21, we're going to do a calculation and we're going to fund our schools in 21, 22 based off of what that attendance number came out to be. The problem is, I'm just going to use my district for an example. Let's say that Murray County had 2,000 students that left, and for some reason they come back in the fall. And let's say 1,000 of them come back. Well, those children are not going to be counted in the funding for the BEP for the 21-22 school year. So we have to have a way to make sure that our LEAs are not going to have to bear the brunt of this. And we've been talking about hold harmless, and it's not really a hold harmless because we're going to, at the end of this story, we're going to fund the children that come back to make sure our LEAs are as solvent as possible, okay? So 21 shows up into August, and let's say 1,000 kids come back to Murray County. They're going to keep attendance on that all the way until October-ish 31st. At the end of October 31st, every LEA sends those numbers up to the Department of Education, and we can use those numbers for year-over-year growth. So we'll know exactly how many children have come back to school. There's a measure in there for growth that the first 2% is funded by the LEA. After that 2%, then we come in and fund our portion of the BEP for the remainder of the students. What we're proposing in this language, and it's BEP Greek, I call it, on the bill, but what it does is it erases that 2% for the 21-22 school year to zero. Which means if any students come back year-over-year growth for 1 year, 21-22, that the state will give the LEAs their BEP portion for those children to help with their funding. In the bill, we will encourage the locals to not cut funding until they know what that number is going to be. Because if the children come back and they reduce the maintenance of effort based off of their previous year's number, they're going to be short for that school year. At the end of 21-22, with the money we've sent to each LEA for growth, when 22-23 comes along, they have kept the attendance like they should have, and in 22-23, it reverts back to the normal BEP, where we will fund the portion of those students that are in their attendance records. And the 2% that we erased in 21-22 will now be reinstated back in 22-23, and everything goes on as normal for funding. This is a 1-year bridge for our LEAs that we will fund the growth of their students that actually come back to their classroom. So that's what the bill does. I'll be happy to expand if you want me to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that explanation. Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative Sapicki. I was on a Zoom over the weekend with some in my area and all, and what they were concerned about, and I knew this and I explained it to them, but what they were concerned about is, so they get the money, the BEP, based on what they end with this school year, this May or June, whenever they finish, for fall of this year. So they were concerned about having a lot of students come back in the fall and not being able to hire enough teachers to cover that, and that, and by the time October, the end of October, I mean, they would have to hire them. So, so that's why I want to try to, so that whoever's watching at home or whatever, that we clarify how, and then, so you bring up the locals doing their maintenance of effort. The locals doing that based on, a lot of times they wait till they get their BEP money and do that. So how do we try to give, our local LEAs the confidence that in terms of hiring and being ready to have that many coming back without making their classes right up to the very end of enrollment.
Chairman Spiggy?
Two-part answer for you. Currently, if kids show up to your school system and just move into the district, right, they're not accounted for in the BEP to begin with. Now, we can all acknowledge that this year has been extraordinary with what's happened. So we're trying to come up with an extraordinary way to meet the needs of the LEA without getting ourselves in BEP trouble. We are using the current mechanism that all the LEAs know exists. The difference is we are reducing the hurdle they have to get over for growth to receive any money to where we're saying if you show any growth. Now, this is where we have to get ahead of this as quick as we can. For us to move this bill with finance to the House floor, if every week we do another committee, this will be on the House floor in 5 weeks. That puts us almost all the way almost to the end of April. County commissions right now are doing budgets right now. We must signal to them what our intentions are so they can start to budget appropriately. Now, if 1,000 more kids show up to your district unexpectedly, that LEA has to figure out how to mitigate that until they get to the growth measure, and there may or may not be money there for them in the end. What we're signaling to them is, if we pass this legislation, we're telling them that when you get those 1,000 kids, we will be there at the end for you in October, halfway through the mid-year when we send more money down. And we'll be able to help you locally by giving you that extra money for those extra kids. So therefore, by funding the children that show up in October, because that's the normal mechanism we use, we are staying in compliant with exactly how we have the BEP right now. And therefore, that's where the locals come in. I think if we signal to them our intentions, then they'll have a little bit of peace of mind knowing, hey, there may be something coming up in August, but we know we're going to get money coming to us in October. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Sapicki, excuse me, you may remember that when we were doing our bill construction for the special session, we actually had a bill drafted to try to do this, which the AG's office shot down for us. I'm going to ask you to address that in relation to this, but then I'm also going to ask you to address one of the issues that came up in that, and that was that districts normally renew contracts for teachers in May and sometimes before. So if we tell them that the numbers you're being funded for based on previous years is 1,000 or 2,000, whatever number lower than what you were, they're not going to hire those teachers. So we're going to be presented potentially in the fall where we had the teachers let go and they may or may not have stuck around to be rehired. So that the LEA is going to face a situation where they may need to hire more, but there's not more to hire. How is your legislation going to address that?
Chairman Spiggy?
So it's a great question. If you look at Northeast Tennessee right now, the numbers of students that are dropping from their classrooms, they're having to address those issues of how do we move forward with enrollments dropping and be prepared that if we're flexible enough, those kids come back. With the unprecedented times that we're in, to stay in compliance with the BEP, so we have uniformity application across the state. So everybody has the same opportunity to be treated like they've been treated in the past. The mechanism we're using right now with the growth is a funding mechanism that all LEAs experience all the time. If they have an influx, and I'll give you another example in Murray County, we have roughly about 600 students right now a year showing up more that we're unaccounted for. And so we're having to figure out, we got to keep teachers, plus we have to go hire new teachers. That's why we're trying to send a message to them is you may be careful not renewing contracts on all your teachers because you don't know what's going to happen in August. I can't fast forward us to August. I have no way to do that. But what we can do is signal to the LEAs that we are prepared to help you if you get into that situation where we got to find more teachers, or we're going to have to take a leap of faith. And I think they could negotiate that with the teachers to say, look, we have money to fund you if the kids come back. If the kids don't come back, either we have to give you a different job in the district, or we have to let you go to someone else who's got more growth that needs teachers. It's great flexibility. And then when you talk about the special session, we were sitting in those meetings for a long, long time. This type of solution was one of the things that and I'm not speaking for the Attorney General, but he did not make a frowny face at. Everything else we did, he just didn't like. Hold harmless, just giving the LEAs money. It created legal problems for us in the future. This solution that we've come up with, and this one we've been working on for a long time, gets us to a point where we can do something and signal to our LEAs that we're willing to help, but we have to do it within the confines of the BEP. Now, I will tell you this right now, this bill has been sitting over at the governor's office for about 3 weeks. The governor is contemplating their own legislation on the BEP. So my intention is, because we're under the gun here with weeks, is if this committee moves this forward from the subcommittee, that will buy Governor Lee's people another week to figure out, are they going to go with this, or are they going to come up with something different that we have to consider? We're trying to get the governor's office to decide, yes, we're good to go on this one, or no, we want to try something different. They'll bring it to us and we'll consider which one's the best, and we'll move them forward. So that's the commitment I'm making to you, is we're trying to move this forward to give the governor another week, because if the governor says, no, we're good on this one, run this one, we're already a week ahead of the schedule to get it to where we have to on the House floor.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Sapicki, for the legislation. I'm looking at Section 1, letter B, number 1. The Department of Education shall distribute an estimated 50% of the funds specifically appropriated for purpose of this section to eligible LEAs no later than June 1st, 2021. The department shall distribute the remainder of the funds to eligible LEAs no later than October 31st, 2021. So is the first 50% based upon the enrollment from last August to end of school year this year?
That is correct.
And then the second 50% is just based upon the enrollment from August, September, and October of the fall?
Chairman Speaking.
So it would be based on the remainder of the BEP that was due them, and then the growth would be factored in on top of that.
Okay.
All right, if there's no other questions right now, we are going to go out of session. We did have the Department of Education down to come in, and I think Charlie Buffalino. So we will go out of session and ask Mr. Buffalino to come in and introduce himself for the record.
Charlie Buffalino, Department of Education. Thank you, Chairman. I think primarily we just wanted to make ourselves available to answer questions if there are any that folks have. Appreciate Chairman Sapicki bringing this legislation. I know we've had lots of conversations about it. Obviously, the BEP and any sort of hold harmless is certainly a complicated topic, and I think there are many facets for the General Assembly to consider. And yes, the governor's office is continuing to sort of contemplate sort of a separate vehicle that exists. That is House Bill 777. That's not a caption bill. The language that sort of is on that is sort of where that's at currently, and hope to be able to share updates with members of the committee sort of when we have them. I think the one thing I would just note for folks that I think is worth sort of considering as sort of we continue to sort of work on this issue together is just how local matches and local maintenance of efforts would or would not be affected by this. The General Assembly, back when sort of COVID started last year, passed a BEP hold harmless. A little bit of a different situation in that we were at the end of the school year enough that we could change sort of the months that we use to calculate, and it wasn't as complicated as an issue that faces everyone now. But a more sort of traditional straight BEP hold harmless would essentially leave those existing elements in place so that with an influx of a certain amount of state funds, and there is $20 million in the governor's proposed budget that was set aside in case this was an issue that was going to get moved on, an influx of state funding with maintaining current requirements for local match, local maintenance of effort, allows that funding to go a lot farther to essentially hold the floor steady. And then the only other issue I would mention is obviously I think there's been a lot of talk about the federal relief funding. There's a lot of money obviously coming to our districts. That funding can't be used for sort of recurring staffing costs sort of at this level. And obviously that's going away in a certain amount of time. And so I think it's important to consider if there are going to be any long-term implications if local matches and local maintenance of efforts drop, as to where that will be come 3 years' time when that additional funding sort of isn't there. Districts will have to make decisions sooner before this were to come through sort of with that, with the proposal that's sort of in front of you. Again, I think it's been a very fruitful conversation. I think we're very appreciative to Chairman Sapicki and appreciate him sort of bringing this forward with the sense of urgency that he has as we continue to look at this issue together. I'll stop there. Primarily just wanted to be available in case members had questions of us.
Does anybody have any members for our witness? Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
So it's great to be able to present a bill and ask questions at the exact same time. So you talked about BEP, or local match, maintenance of effort. Because of Tennessee's position with COVID-19 and having a growth in revenue, aren't there not restrictions on maintenance of effort right now that LEAs cannot reduce their maintenance of effort because of our growth in Tennessee?
So thank you, Chairman. Not quite. If state portions were to drop, which they would if there isn't sort of a hold harmless here based on the enrollment in this year, those local matches or those requirements are based on sort of what they're getting. So it could be dropped if at the local level they made that decision. I think, if I could follow up, if you would, I think you may have been referring to the federal requirements of maintenance of effort. Am I correct in that regard? So yes, that's a complicated question and one that we are continuing to look for guidance from the federal government on. I think going back to special session, we were talking about this. There is a requirement in the federal relief funding that states cannot reduce their funding in order to, unless, or otherwise there would be at risk of having to revert or turn back some of that federal funding. I think with the most recent ESSER 3.0 and the American Rescue Plan, sorry, I was forgetting the acronym, there is additional maintenance of effort requirements that could put the state in jeopardy of that if there isn't some sort of hold harmless there. Again, it's the sort of thing that I think would get clarified in regs and further guidance that hasn't come out yet, but there is at least the risk of that if sort of something isn't done on that front. I hope that helps answer your question.
Chairman Sapicki?
A little bit. So there's nothing in this bill that requires LEAs to cut their funding.
That's correct.
Okay. And so it's totally at the discretion of the LEAs based off the conversations that we have possibly in committee, encouraging them to, until we get past August, September, October, we really don't know what position you're going to be in. So be careful cutting funds on the front end because you may end up having to go back and fix a budget on the back end if the children come back into school.
Yes, I think that's correct. I think that's fair. I think part of the concern, though, is given those budget decisions have to be made, given you can't use the federal funding to sort of pay for recurring sort of staffing costs like that, you still may be looking at that sort of at the local level statewide, whereas if it were done sort of in the way it had been done last year, those requirements would be sort of carried through because the state would be putting that through on the front end. But it's an important thing to consider and think through.
One more.
Chairman Sapicki?
So an LEA, because they're restricted on what they can use the CARES Act money for, they could use the CARES Act money for something else that they were currently funding and take that money and use it to fund personnel if they so choose for the short term of the next 21-22 school year to bridge the gap.
I think potentially that's correct. I mean, the requirements for the federal funding are pretty broad. I mean, it has to go to COVID relief with a special emphasis put on facilities and learning loss. But I think potentially districts could be creative in thinking through that.
Representative Love, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Charlie, for being here. Knowing that we do have students who have left some of our school systems, the budget amount that we currently have is based upon, is it based upon the assumption that students did leave, or is it funding students that we thought are going to be there?
I think I understand. So I think you're asking for next year's 21-22 school funding budget, essentially, what that is based on in terms of current year enrollment.
Right.
Yes, great question. So that is going to continue to be updated and won't be final until June. So the way that that goes is there are enrollment counts that are sort of submitted each month, essentially. Those are projections, those are estimates. Those can get trued up and cleaned up by districts all the way till the very end. Come April, May, and June, the department begins, and we do this every year, nothing different sort of in this process. We'll send each district their estimated funding for the next year, and we do it sort of for 3 months. So there's an opportunity to true up, make sure sort of data is clean and that something sort of wasn't missed at the local level in reporting. And none of that is sort of fully finalized until June in terms of those actual numbers, but that's what the process looks like.
Representative Love?
Thank you. And so in the budget, we have the money to cover all of that. And there are no plans to cut the budget knowing that we have lost students, is there?
So that is sort of based on sort of the current projections. And as I mentioned before, there's currently funding in the proposed budget in case there was a desire to do a hold harmless, to sort of keep the floor steady for districts. That's where that additional $20 million has sort of been set aside as a proposed. That cannot be done unless there's sort of a vehicle or a bill that sort of would do that. That can't just be done sort of through the budget process, because
Okay.
if that answers the question.
That does. Thank you.
Representative Clemens?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sorry I was late. I was presenting a bill in another committee this afternoon. So I want clarification on that budgetary issue. So is the governor's budget amendment going to take that money out, or is the budget that he presented going to remain the same? Because I'm trying to figure out why we need a harmless provision if it's going to remain the same.
If I understand your question correctly, I mean, I can't answer on what the final supplementary budget is going to look like. I can say that there was, in the proposed budget, there was $20 million that was sort of put there in the case that something was going to be done in terms of a BEP hold harmless. I can't comment on how that's all going to shake out.
So you have no idea whether or not his budget amendment is going to pull back any of the money that was in the original one?
No, I can't speak to that. I mean, I think those conversations are ongoing, as they are with every element that's being considered in a supplemental budget.
Okay.
Representative Clemens, follow up?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Representative Carringer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess, I mean, from serving on Knox County Commission, and every year at this time, we would try to estimate what the county's portion was going to be based off our BEP, and we would get early reports on what we thought BEP was going to be, and how much we thought that the county was going to match, or for the maintenance of effort and all. So I know how hard it is and how difficult it is on our individual counties, and I know some counties are better at being able to do this and better positioned to be able to allow, for more students and all, but I also realize some of our smaller districts in Tennessee don't quite have the funds to be able to maybe put that money in. And I guess, so in terms of saying to our counties, I'm always concerned about what we are kind of mandating to our counties to pick up the pieces and do. And I guess I'm just kind of saying, we're sort of putting it on them right now to make sure that they've got enough teachers and when school starts in August to be able to handle it. But waiting till August, I mean, like any really good teachers, I mean, if they are saying, well, we've got this based on what we're ending this year, and it shows a whole lot less than what, not this school year, but the previous school year, and they say, they can't just say to those teachers, say, well, you might have a job, you might not, you're going to have to wait till August. I am concerned that we would lose some of our really good teachers, and that happens quite a bit. They have to wait till the last minute, and personally, I've always thought it was horrible for teachers to have to go through the summer and wait till the last minute, and school starts, and then they come in late. But I just wonder if there's, I mean, and I understand there's $20 million, that's been put aside. We're just in unusual times, so it's really hard to try to predict how many. But I feel like that our local schools and our local counties need to have something. I mean, every year, however much you give, the next year you can't give a penny less. So I'm just wondering how any of that, if they do end up giving more than say they did last year, they're going to be having to do that from here out, or will they get an exception for this year, with counties and all? Does that make...
Yeah, I think I understand. And I mean, I think it's an astute observation. I think it's what Chairman Sapicki was talking about. I mean, there is going to be some uncertainty in that period in the sort of proposal in front of you, in that, if the students are coming back to make those decisions, but they're making budgeting decisions with staff now, and that is going to be more of a pinch than normal. I think you were articulating some of the challenges of this estimates that happen in normal years or sort of normal circumstances as you're looking at estimates and sort of trying to figure that out. That is going to, I think, be even sort of more so than in previous years if the relief or the additional funding sort of through growth we're talking about wouldn't start to kick in until August. And really, that's just the beginning of it. It would sort of be later as sort of it's laid out in the bill, too. And it's one of the things that I think is worth considering in terms of whatever the pathway is, if something sort of is going to happen on this front. I think that's an important consideration to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's the thing. I hate for any county to lose any of their good teachers by having to wait. I mean, it's just kind of the times we live in, but everybody's trying to hang in there and be very flexible, and it is what it is, but then people have to be able to provide for their families, and so I'm very, it's going to be very interesting to see how we as a state become out as the leader of this, and trying to kind of see what is happening. And maybe by the end of the year, maybe some of our local LEAs, I mean, I hope that, they'll get in contact with all their state representatives just to kind of know where they're at, where they ended, and the difference in the year before, and that we're all together. I just want our locals, like Representative Sapicki's worked so hard, and I want all of our locals to know how we all take this, very passionate about taking care of them and not just leaving it high and dry. And that our governor is very much on board with making sure. So thank you very much for coming.
Any other questions for our guests? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee.
We will go back into session. Chairman Sapicki, you are recognized.
So currently in the BEP, from talking to staff, they roughly, for growth, they roughly keep about 20 to 23 million in the budget. Some years that goes a long way, some years it doesn't, depending on who comes back. In the fiscal note, you're looking about, the projected is $51 million. 23 plus the 20 million of the governor puts us at 43. We'd have to find another $10 million, depending on how many of the students come back. I served on the county commission in Murray County for 4 years. I served on the budget committee and as chairman too. I know exactly what you're talking about. The great unknown from end of school year to August. And the problem is it's been exacerbated by what we're going through in COVID. If the children don't come back and you show no growth, you're fine. I'm worried about the LEAs that are going to have hundreds, maybe 1,000 kids come back, and now they're scrambling. And in a district like maybe yours that doesn't show any growth, in a district like mine that shows growth, there's going to be jobs for good teachers. There will be. There's always a job for a good school teacher. Now, you may not be close to where you want to, but there's always a job for a good school teacher. And so, like I said, this is a funding mechanism. We're waiting to see what Governor Lee wants to do and take a look at what his thoughts are. Like I said, on the House side, with finance, we're 5 weeks away if everything goes smooth. We got to start signaling to our LEAs what our intention is so they can start preparing for next school year. and I'll have any questions.
Any other questions for our sponsor? Question has been called. Seeing no objections, we'll be voting on House Bill 590. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. On to full education. That brings us back to what is now our last item on the calendar. All right, we'll give him a second here. That brings us to item number 10, House Bill 219. Do I have a motion? Motion. Properly motion. Chairman Whitson, you are recognized. And I believe you do have an amendment with this.
Yes, Chairman, Committee, thank you.
Properly motion. And what's the drafting code that you have on that?
The drafting code I have, Chairman, Hastings, is 4564.
All right, that's what we've got. You are recognized to explain your amendment.
Mr. Chairman, that amendment basically makes the bill.
Without objection, we'll be voting to add Amendment 4564 to House Bill 219. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. We are back on your bill as amended. Please explain your bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This information that we did not have a statewide library coordinator was brought to me during a meeting with the Tennessee Association of School Librarians. I was kind of surprised that they did not have this position, and I was told that at one time in the Department of Education they did have this, and somehow over the years it had fallen away. And this legislation reinstates the Tennessee State Librarian Coordinator position within the Department of Education. By reinstating this position, it will allow the department to promote best practices among school librarians and technology coordinators while also developing and promoting strategies for librarians to partner with other classroom instructors to support school and district level instructional programs. You know, it dovetails perfectly with the goals set by the Department of Education's strategic plan, Tennessee Best for All, which was adopted by this Assembly in 2019. And the bill explains the duties and responsibilities for the school librarians, and they will assist implementing the department's strategic plan in school literacy and digital initiatives. The coordinator will consult, guide, and train school librarians to strengthen school library programs for students in grades kindergarten through 12. They will address the inequities in the staffing of school librarians and report to the commissioner when additional resources are needed. They'll provide input on revisions to the school librarian evaluation model, work with the state library and archives to promote school libraries with equal access to high-quality educational reading materials and resources, support the department's work by promoting best practices among school librarians and technology coordinators, and develop and promote strategies for school librarians to partner with classroom instructors to support school and district level instructional programs. And I just want to thank the Department of Education for helping draft these duties and responsibilities of this librarian coordinator at the state level.
Thank you for that. You've heard the explanation. Does anybody have any questions for the sponsor? Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the sponsors, thank you for presenting your bill for us today. The question I have is this a new position you're creating, or are we moving bodies, or what?
Chairman Whitson? Yes, it is a new position. It comes with a fiscal note and will require approximately, I believe, around $68,000 added to the budget. So it is traveling with a fiscal note.
Chairman Reagan?
I assume that you've discussed this with the department, whether or not they're willing to propose to the governor that he put this in the funding for supplemental budget?
Chairman Whitson?
We're probably going to do a two-pronged attack on that. One, try to get it into the budget, and but also to carry legislation to see if we can get it out of the budget committee. Good point. Thank you.
Chairman Sapicki?
I'm scanning real quick, and I may have missed it. There are qualifications for this position, correct?
Chairman Whitson?
Yes, there is, and I believe that's discussed in the fiscal note at the pay scale and grade that will be. I don't have those with me right now. And good question, Chairman. And I will find that out and get to you.
Any other questions for our sponsor? Seeing none, we will be voting on House Bill 219. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. On to full education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and thank y'all so much for a committee that meets at 4:30. I am grateful for you, every one of you.
That brings us to the end of the calendar. I do want to mention that the last calendar in here will be March 30th. It will be March 30th. Does anybody have anything else to announce? Do I have a motion to adjourn? With that, we stand adjourned.